first, I think just to introduce everybody on the call today. So we have Fred Forsley here, who is the founder and CEO of Shipyard Brewing. Also, Ronnie Simpson, who is the skipper of Shipyard Brewing, who is about to embark on the Global Solo Challenge, which we'll learn more about in a little bit. And then Robert Cochran on the call as well, who is the creative director for Shipyard, who's been part of the team in bringing Ronnie and Fred together on this mission. And then Marissa Verano here, a colleague and friend and partner of Fred and Ronnie and the team. So looking forward to a good conversation today. So just to learn more about Ronnie and the Global Solo Challenge, Ronnie, can you tell us just more about you and sailing, how you got into sailing and how you got connected to this endeavor in general?
Yeah, so I think the basic rundown is my name is Ronnie Simpson. I'm 38 years old. I've been calling Hawaii home for several years, but that's we're going to be in Maine after the race, based in Portland, Maine, where Shipyard Brewing is. And everyone has their own story of how they got into sailing, and mine in particular was that 15 years ago when I was 23, I got into sailing as unintentionally as a means of recovery and exploration and therapy and everything else. I got wounded in Iraq quite seriously when I was 19 years old in the Marines. And I reached a point in my life where I realized I wasn't quite happy, and I decided to change it. And I got into sailing, and it ended up being I lived on boats. I've cruised boats all over mostly the Pacific, and it's become my livelihood ever since I've been in my early 20s. I've been working in the sailing industry, and I've taken that pretty far. And I've always had a dream of racing around the world single-handed, specifically in a race called the Vendée Globe. And about just a little bit over a year ago, an opportunity arose where I had a chance to do this race called the Global Solo Challenge. And in many ways, this is the sort of like the minor leagues of the Vendée Globe. This is a more Corinthian, more amateur race. And from day one, I saw this opportunity as an opportunity A, to go live my dream of racing solo around the world, but also I saw it as a launching pad for me to get to the Vendée Globe. And I'm sure we'll talk about all that stuff a little bit more later. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. And the Global Solo Challenge is a solo nonstop around the world race, which begins different dates for different boats. But for my boat, we begin on October 28th, which is, just to put it in reference, I believe today is October 5th, so only 23 days. So we're like in a mad dash right now, doing final preparations and getting ready. And yeah, we're in Spain. We just sailed over here from Portland, Maine, home of Shipyard Brewing. And yeah, just getting ready for the race, and got a lot going on.
So speaking of Maine, how did you get connected to Maine?
I got connected to Maine through this race, through this opportunity, and through this boat. So when I first got the opportunity to do this race was late July of last year. So let's call it 14 months ago. So an old friend of mine reached out to me, and he's a friend from the West Coast. I knew him from racing solo to Hawaii. He was one of my rivals and my competitors, but of course, when you're off the water, you're all friends. And his name's Whitehall Stokes. He's from the Los Angeles area, but he has actually big ties to Maine as well. But anyways, he had this boat called Sparrow. It was a 50-foot round the world race boat. And he purchased it in 2015 or 16, I believe in 15. He purchased it for the intent of sailing it solo, not racing it, but he got this old round the world race boat, and he wanted to go solo around the world on the boat. So he just wanted to basically just go for a lap. No race, no media, just wanted to go do it. And so during COVID, it ended up being a great time for him to go. So he left California during COVID, I believe in October. And he sailed out around Hawaii and then down around Cape Horn. He rounded Cape Horn on December 26th of 2020, the Boxing Day overseas and day after Christmas in the US. So he rounded Cape Horn end of 2020. He pulled into Puerto Williams, Chile, I believe. Yeah, I don't think Argentina would take him because of like, I forget, because most people go to Ushuaia, but he went to Puerto Williams, Chile. And then he had to fix some stuff on the boat. He kind of needed some parts and stuff. So he ended up deciding to fix the boat, and he decided, the boat really needed some work. So he was going to go back up to the East Coast. So he went from Chile to Charleston, South Carolina, and stashed the boat for a while. And then he sailed it from Charleston up to Portland, Maine, and dropped it off at the Maine Yacht Center, which is a very, very renowned yard for working on these kind of boats. And that's in Portland, Maine. So he dropped it off at Maine Yacht Center in October of 2021. And then he had them do a bunch of work, and he was deciding what to do with the boat, whether he was going to sell it or whether he was going to prepare for another voyage. And he had this race, the Global Solo Challenge, which it's a new race, and he wanted to do the race, but his personal situation, he had a business, he had a family, he had kids, and he just had some other things going on. And he said, this is not my time to do this race, but I want to see the boat go on the race. And he reached out to me and he offered to loan me the boat. And that's how it all started. And the boat was in Portland, Maine. So first thing I had to do is I had to tidy up some work things, some work obligations in the West Coast and Hawaii. And then August 22nd of 2022, I flew out to Portland, Maine, and I spent a week with the boat. We put the sails on, we went sailing, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, yeah, this is a cool thing. This is real. I can see and touch the boat. I can sail it. Yeah, this is real. Let's do it. So late August of 2022, I fully committed to the program. And I knew from day one that I would just have to work every day until the start of the race, because basically I had 14 months to get ready for a project that ideally you would have 2 to 3 years for. And yeah, now we're in the home stretch. It feels, in many ways, it feels like yesterday, but in many ways, it also feels like a decade ago. So we're only, like I said, 13 months into a 14-month project, really, a little bit over 13 months into it. And yeah, it's been an incredible adventure. And I always hoped I would find a title sponsor, and I had no idea it would be Shipyard Brewing from Portland, Maine. So it's really cool how everything has evolved, and it's very unscripted, and it's been an incredible experience.
Yeah, the interesting, backdrop is, obviously Bruce Schwab and the Vendée. A lot of people may not realize what a world, kind of a U.S. treasure to have an athlete. And I look at you guys as athletes, Ronnie, that really taking on something that nobody in the U.S. has done. It's really something that was, it leaves from France and is more of a European sport. And obviously, we were lucky enough to meet Bruce and get involved in his project. And I was got reacquainted on a Zoom call with Ronnie just recently, and was amazing the fact that he ended up back in Maine and his whole story. And so he gave some advice on that talk. He said, definitely don't make relationships decisions after you've been at sea for 120 days.
We did before he left. So
well, so did he. But anyways, it's all good. You're young, special people.
You got in just in time.
Yeah. So right. Yeah. So anyways, I've always loved sailing. My brother Richard was an officer in the Navy, and he got a J-24 Invictus, and we sailed it. My dad was a Navy guy, and he was a prisoner of war in the South Pacific, and he started a home for veterans in Gray, Maine with my mom, and we ran it as a family. And he was a behavioralist and believed that a passion in something, whether it's making rugs or gardening or lawnmower, whatever it is, if you have something to focus on, an interest and a passion, it'll keep you moving forward in life and having a purpose. And obviously that with Ronnie and the quest to do ultimately the Vendée Globe, but this Global 50 got me excited, and all the people in my company thought, what are you, crazy to commit this kind of capital and energy to an event, this type of thing? We're in a kind of a challenge of where we started in the beer business in 92. We had maybe 6 competitors, and now we have 6,000 competitors, and it's just a bizarre thing. But for a variety of reasons, all the stars lined up. So I'm very excited to come over to El Coruna, Spain on the 26th. I got my ticket, and James Coyle from the UK is going to meet me, and we've actually got a call next Wednesday to talk about how we can market and help promote. And then we've got this global toast that we're coordinating, and really feel strongly that people will support Pumpkinhead Pete and Ronnie sailing around the world. It's truly a major, major undertaking at all levels. And I'm excited for Shipyard Brewing to be involved. And our goal is to get many others in support, either emotionally, financially, and trying to ultimately, we own the brand Shipware, and it's a lifestyle brand that hasn't really been invented. And we've talked about different ideas of involving creating that would be a vehicle to try to raise money in addition to for the Vendée race once this race is once we've reached that point. So it's a major, major undertakings, and I just am excited to follow it.
The Global Solo Challenge, I think the first thing is this is a new race. So this is the first edition of the Global Solo Challenge. And the Global Solo Challenge is the brainchild of a round the world racer himself. He's an Italian guy named Marco Nannini. And so back in, I believe it was 2010 and 11, he raced around the world double-handed in class 40s, which are a class of 40-foot boats. And those are really who I'm kind of mainly racing against in this race as well. So Marco raced a class 40 around the world, 2 people on a 40-foot boat. And he's very passionate. And he's also done like single-handed transatlantic races and everything else. And he's always been a very entrepreneurial guy. And I remember following him. He actually reminds me a lot of myself because he would just promote what he was doing and get it out in the sailing media and be kind of creative with it. And then always looking for sponsorship for that endeavor. And so I've actually followed Marco's career, and he saw this huge gap in the marketplace. Essentially, you have this one race at one extreme, and it's the Vendée Globe. And the Vendée Globe, if you're not familiar with it, it is around the world, nonstop, by yourself, and it's in a 60-foot boat. But the boats in that race, you have to have a boat that measures in as what they call an IMOCA 60. And it's basically like it's basically the boat version of a Formula One car. It is a very, very technically advanced class of boat, and they're constantly evolving. And like, you can show up in a 12-year-old boat and you can go race in the middle of the pack potentially. But you still need that IMOCA 60. And so those boats are very expensive. You're talking, 10 million euros to build a brand new one and another 10 to campaign it for 4 years. So you're talking 20 million euros to do a brand new boat. And you're talking like €1 million to buy quite an old boat and then a couple to run it. So you're anywhere between 5 and 20 million euros to have a decent campaign. And so that's quite a large undertaking financially, and you need a big corporate sponsor, and that's not always attainable for everyone. So that's the Vendée Globe. At the other end of the solo around the world stuff, you have a race called the Golden Globe Race. And that is this old retro race that was just relaunched in 2018. It took place once in the 60s. This Australian guy named Don McIntyre kind of brought it back. So now they have the Golden Globe Race, or the GGR. And that's a really, really cool race. I'm not knocking it at all. It was phenomenal to follow. And there was a great storyline in the last Golden Globe Race. Fantastic race. But that race takes place in these like throwback era 60s technology 35-foot boats that any person can buy, and you can go do that race for like 100,000 euros or $100,000 or something. And so you have these like two polar opposite races, and that race has no technology allowed. So you've got to navigate old school. You can't really like upload videos of yourself to Instagram while you're on Starlink. Like, there's no technology in that race. It's a very like old throwback race, and it's very, very cool what it is, but it doesn't change the fact that you have these two races that are single-handed around the world races, but they're polar opposites. So the Global Solo Challenge, Marco decided to make a race that was more accessible and had more appeal to like the 90% of us that exist in the middle of those two extremes. And so with the Global Solo Challenge, you can just go get a sensible boat, you can go get a 2010 model class 40 for 150, 200 grand, and you can get it ready for another 150 or 200 grand. And so for like the less than the price of an average home, you can go race around the world. It's still a ton of money, but it's not $10 million. So on a reasonable budget, people are able to get everything from like cruising boats to my old Open 50 to class 40s to other boats, but there's a lot of boats between 30 and 60 feet, and there's just a wide variety of boats. And then to make it fair, all the boats have a handicap rating based on the performance of the boat, the theoretical performance. So if you have like the first boat in this race it's an old 1970s 34-foot boat called a Sparkman and Stevens 34. And so that individual who's from Wales, he started on August 26th. And then, there was another start like 2 weeks later, and then there was another start a couple weeks later. And so now you've got 4 boats on the course, but then there's 3 more boats leaving October 21st, and then there's 8 boats leaving October 28th, which is my start date. And then there is another boat leaving 3 weeks later, and then there's another couple guys that have even faster boats, but we're not quite sure who's going to make it to the start line, because it's a massive undertaking, as you mentioned originally, and it's been very humbling to myself, even having kind of really been around the game for a while. I really knew what I was getting into, but I'm still constantly humbled every day at really just how big of an undertaking it is, especially with the resources that I've had, which up until recently, I didn't even know how I was going to pay for the last good chunk of change until Shipyard Brewing came on board, until you helped find that support, which has just been phenomenal. And I just kept telling myself every day, like, I don't quite know how I'm going to get to the start, but I am going to get to the start. And day by day, it just kind of continues to work out. And my boat is a 1994 Open 50. So she was designed and built in Australia. She raced around the world in 1994 from Charleston, South Carolina, back to Charleston with an Australian skipper. And then she raced around the world in 98, 99, also from Charleston to Charleston with an American skipper. And then she's been in private hands for several years. And then now she's in my hands. She's actually owned by a veteran sailing nonprofit, US Patriot Sailing, which we'll touch on hopefully in a little bit. And so she's a great platform for the race. And it's exactly what Marco envisioned, which was like, it gave the creation of this race gave my boat a reason to be thriving again, because one day she was sort of like this obsolete race boat, but the next day there's this new race and you're like, well, she's actually a very budget conscious, very cool platform that you could go do well in the Global Solo Challenge in. So it's a really cool race for the boat, and it's a really cool boat for the race. And I expect to take, like, if everything goes relatively smoothly, I'd like to go around the world in 130 days. So that's going to be single-handed around the world in 130 days. We do go around the three great capes. So no Panama Canal, no Suez Canal. You leave Spain, you go down the Atlantic, sort of with Africa off of your left side and South America off of your right side. And then you make a left-hand turn and you start going east. And then you go under the Cape of Good Hope, which is the bottom of Africa. That'll be off to your port side or your left side. And then you keep going east, and eventually you'll have Australia off to your left side, and you'll have Antarctica off to your right side. And then you keep going east and you go under New Zealand, and then you keep going east until you get to Cape Horn, which is the bottom of South America. And that's the most notorious and treacherous place to sail on planet Earth. And so you round Cape Horn, and then you'll turn left again, and then you start going north up the Atlantic back to Spain. Again, I hope to do it in about 130 days, 130 days, excuse me. And a unique thing about this race as well is that it is a nonstop race, but you're not disqualified if you do have to stop. So you take a time penalty so that you can't just like pull into port in New Zealand and throw some more food and one more sail on and go. You can't do a pit stop. You have to stay tied up for 4 days, or you could just do a quick pit stop, but they're going to add 4 days to your time. So there's a 4-day time commitment or penalty to make a stop. Having said that, we're going to be planning on going nonstop, but if we break some gear and we need to stop into Cape Town for 4 days, like, we can do that and get back in the race. And we will probably definitely not finish as well, but we can still go finish the race. And I think that's I think with in the bigger picture of things, with my goal being the Vendée Globe, and with Shipyard Brewing being so aligned to those goals, if we can get around the world and we can tell this story and we can promote Shipyard Brewing and just create this story, but also gain experience for me and hopefully prove on a global stage what I'm capable of, both in terms of sailing and also marketing this whole thing and telling that story. And yeah, I think it's a fantastic opportunity. This is my dream. So it's a huge undertaking, but yeah, really stoked where we're at. And I'm super grateful to Shipyard Brewing and to yourself and to Fred and Robert and everyone who has really helped make this possible, and certainly make it a lot easier. It was really nice. Like this morning, for example, there's so many details that we're still taking care of last minute, again, because a month ago or 6 weeks ago, I didn't even know how I was going to pay for all of this. This sponsorship only came to be less than 6 weeks ago, which is wild. And so like today, this morning, I ordered 3,000 euros worth of freeze-dried food from France. And so like, you don't think about it, but and that's not everything we need. So even preparing for this, you're like, oh yeah, there's 5 grand in food. There's like 20 grand in safety gear. We're putting on a ton of solar panels and stuff from Bruce Schwab, and we've got the mast out of the boat. We're doing more work to the boat and everything else. And you're just always spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. It's a very expensive endeavor. And so it's just super grateful to have, a great supportive sponsor on board who's helping us get to the start line. This question I get a lot of times is people say like, so what do you do at night? Do you anchor? Like, do you anchor to sleep? It's just like, I get asked that question all the time. Yeah. So as far as eating, because of the duration of the voyage, you need to bring, 3 meals a day times 130 days. Quick math, that's like 400 meals. So you need to bring,
How many Shipyard beers?
I don't know, however many Fred can get over here in his suitcase.
As long as you don't finish them too early. That's the trick. It's how to make them last 130 days.
You gotta save them for Cape Horn.
I can see myself going down the Atlantic and justifying it and being like, all right, well, if I drink that case of beer, I could make the boat lighter and faster. So let's drink that case of beer. Sleeping as well is sometimes terrifying, and sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you've got ships around, or like the worst is when the wind is very light and variable, or if you're in the midst of a big change in the weather, and you can have a full day or 2 or even more, especially if the wind is just really light and fickle and inconsistent. You don't get any sleep actually. When it's rough out, you at least usually have solid breeze, so you can like put up small sails for the conditions and you're on the autopilot. And the autopilot, I should touch on that. You're in a race like this, you're on autopilot all the time. So you have a computer driving the boat basically all the time. And if you're hand steering, like something's gone wrong because you have enough to do without, hand steering. So you're on autopilot, and the whole time you're just adjusting the sails, putting up different sails, you're working on the boat, you're fixing stuff, you're looking at the weather, you're navigating, etc. But you're also eating and sleeping. So the point I'm getting at is that sometimes when you're going really, really fast and it's rough, especially at night, you're just flying through the night with these huge waves and you're trying to land your bunk. And you're like, this computer is driving for me. And if at any moment, if this thing spazzes out, like it could go bad really fast. And you'll be laying there in your bunk, and you can either like, sometimes if you're upwind, you'll feel the boat launch off a wave and you're just waiting for the crash. And then you hit, it's just bang. Or you'll be in your bunk and you'll be surfing downwind and you'll feel the boat light up super hard on a wave. And you can like feel the acceleration, and you're just absolutely flying like 20 knots of boat speed, and you're in your bunk and you're just like thinking of all the things that can go wrong. Like, what if I hit a whale at this speed? What if, whatever. What if I hit a container or something, or a huge like log? I've seen huge logs like after the Japanese tsunami in 2011. There were logs all over the ocean. And so like you get these kind of things. And so you're always sleeping with one eye open a little bit. And the real thing is with sleep is to manage your sleep is you have to pace yourself and manage yourself, because you are single-handed and you're out there for a long time. And if you get really worn down, you can make really bad decisions. And also if you get really worn down, you can get to the point where you just where you become dead to the world, where you just like pass out, you're dead to the world, and then bad things are happening and you don't wake up for them. And I've been in that scenario, my first solo race to Hawaii in 2010. And I learned a valuable lesson, which was that you're not allowed to get so tired that you just become dead to the world, because like I said, terrible things will happen and you won't even wake up for them. So really when you're sleeping, I like to go into a sleep cycle in the nighttime where I sail the boat a lot more conservatively at night. And then that way I don't have to deal with bigger or huge sails or being on the edge of control at night in case something goes wrong. So you throttle the boat back a little bit and you go into a sleep cycle where you're like 20 minutes, get up, look around, go back down for 20 minutes. But a lot of times you don't even really have to look around or get up. You can look at the radar. And I mean, the radar is great technology. Like if anything's out there, it shows it. It tells you. If there's a ship out there, you'll see it on the radar. So shipping's a big threat. And then also, it's the weather. And something that people say sometimes in ocean racing is they say sleep is a weapon. And I agree with that fully. Like sleep is a weapon. So if you are well rested, you're going to make better decisions. And so staying well rested and doing these cycles so that you're well rested, because if you are well rested, you'll be kind of lounging in your bunk and the wind will pick up 2 or 3 knots and the boat changes its attitude just a little bit. And before you even look at the numbers, you can feel it. You're like, oh, the boat just got a little bit windier, and you wake up. Whereas if you're at the exhaustion point, the boat can be laid over in a squall and you won't wake up. So it's sleep is a weapon. So 4 years after I got hurt, I got into sailing in 2008. And then very, very quickly, I jumped into the sport even more. And it became my lifestyle, my livelihood, my passion, my career, everything. And sailing gave me so much. Sailing, I have said it oftentimes in interviews, and I still say it. It's because it's true, but sailing saved my life. I was on a path that was not a great path. And then sailing really put me on a much more prosperous path and made me a very inspired individual. And I think at the end of the day, it's what a lot of these guys and girls need, is just some inspiration. Sailing certainly gave that to me. And so sailing has had such a profound impact on my life that I've always had a desire to share that gift with other veterans. As a wounded veteran, that's a cause that's very easy for me to kind of segue into, and like, all right, well, that's a cause I can be very passionate about. And that's a way I can help people. I can help inspire other veterans, get them sailing. And it's an incredible ability to help heal veterans. Whether it's the therapeutic benefit, the inspirational benefit, the camaraderie benefit of creating a team of vets doing these things. And there's just so many benefits that we don't even have time to fully go over all of that. But back in San Francisco in 2010 and 2012, I was sponsored by a wounded vet nonprofit. And in my first 2 Hawaii races, and then we did a series of clinics with them called Hope for the Warriors, which was the nonprofit. And then my friend and I, Walter, actually started our own nonprofit in 2013. We did that from about 2013 to about 2016. We did it in San Francisco and Hawaii. And then during that time, 2015, I actually got to know Peter Quinn from Maryland and got to know US Patriot Sailing, which is a Maryland-based sailboat racing nonprofit for veterans. And it's a really cool group. And as I got to know them, I stayed in touch with them, did some stuff with them, did a couple of races. We were very good friends. I love that organization and feel very passionately about that organization and its value. And so when this campaign got offered to me last summer, they were the first people I called. And I said, hey, Peter, I want to team up with US Patriot and be able to raise some tax-free dollars, but also be able to promote awareness for US Patriot Sailing and try to help out some other vets. And he definitely wanted to get tied in with that. And so long story short, the boat is now owned by US Patriot Sailing, and I'm very proud to raise awareness for them and also try to help inspire some other vets. And back in Maryland, we took a bunch of vets out. And then Fred had a big family. We're getting some feedback now. Fred had a big family connection to the veteran cause. And so his family, his parents have been working with veterans, and he can explain, they've been working with veterans since World War II. And so that was something Fred and I really connected about, and something he was very passionate about supporting a veteran's cause, but also a veteran's race.
Yeah, it's definitely, you see it all over, with the 22 number of veterans that may be committing suicide and my dad, being a therapist and having a passion for veterans, having been a veteran, obviously opened up my eyes to it. And then my brothers being in the military, and now with the Iraq War, Afghanistan, in a lot of ways, that war, those wars were more extreme than World War II in a variety of ways, mainly because of the intensity of how close we are to it. And the reality of war, I'll never know, but we have many veterans today that have unfortunately had to experience the worst of it. And Ronnie can speak to that. I can't even begin to speak to it. So the reality is, I think no matter what, people need a passion and a goal, especially people that have had trauma in their life. And but that's what's exciting about this. It's an example of how someone can find a vision and a passion. And there are a lot of people in the world right now that need examples of that. And so this is an example of that. It's like, why do people climb Everest? I'm sitting here wondering, why in the world would you go to sea and put yourself at risk and all of these things? Yeah, it's a race and it's what people do, but this is pretty extreme. This isn't like motocross where you do it for 2 hours, park the bike, and you're all set. This is truly an extreme sport. And talking to Bruce Schwab and having some of the discussions the other day with him, it's amazing that somebody can actually have that kind of passion. And that's what he sees. And Ronnie was, he said it's a crazy thing and a crazy idea, but Ronnie has the ability and the passion. And we mentioned a statement that Dodge Morgan, who was a sailor in Maine that sailed around the world, he passed away, but he said to Bruce, he said, it's not important to win. What's important is to want to win. So that passion of not only finishing, but winning, I think is what Ronnie has for himself and America and really all sailors. It's a competitive, friendly sport at the end of the day. And so he'll be making friends from all over the world. And I'm excited about seeing you out there, Ronnie.
How can people follow along Ronnie's journey?
Yeah, the best way is definitely going to be through YouTube and through our YouTube channel. Our hope is that we're still kind of exploring how this is going to work, but our hope is that Ronnie can, capture as much footage, sort of POV style, while he's in the midst of the adventure, and then send it back to us via Starlink, and then we'll try to curate together, a series of episodes that follow him along. And I think it will be exciting. Just hearing his story today is exciting. Just understanding. For me, I'm not a sailor, and so understanding how you even sleep and eat is fascinating. And I think this will be a story that a lot of people want to hear, not just sailors, not just extreme adventurers, but also just beer drinkers who are encouraged to take a risk.
I'm going to be drinking a lot of Shipyard during this thing.
Well, Ronnie,
calm my nerves.
The thing is, I love beer, so it's a very good sponsorship with Shipyard. And but on a serious note, it's been really cool that Shipyard as a brand, but also Fred Forsley as an individual are, I think, so closely aligned. I would always looking for sponsors, I would always kind of compare it to dating someone who didn't want to date you. And so you're like pursuing someone or something, and then you would just get this like rejection. And I was like, when I meet my right sponsor, it's going to click. And so when Marissa and I were telling Fred what we're going to do and everything, he was just like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Like, this is awesome. We were on board. So, I mean, there was no convincing that had to take place because we found an aligned sponsor and we found an aligned brand. And I think that's something that's really cool. And the fact that, that there is already this kind of coordinated effort of, hey, how can we do this well and try to go to the next level and do the Vendée Globe? That's immensely exciting for me. And Shipyard's an incredible brand. I see a lot of upside potential in terms of the marketing and everything else, but it's really cool that it's I think like even Shipyard Brewing, there's a sailing, like there's a tall ship on the logo. You guys are originally, as Fred said, like the original brewery and everything was on the same ground where they used to build tall ships. And it's Portland, Maine. The culture they have for around the world racing in Portland, Maine is something we didn't really touch on too much today due to time, but It's very, very cool. And there's just so many cool tie-ins with Portland, Maine, and with Shipyard Brewing, and with what we're doing as a sporting endeavor. But then Fred's and Shipyard's affiliations and connections with veteran related causes, but also, like you said, enjoying a beer while you're out there at sea, especially after you round Cape Horn or round the Cape of Good Hope or across the equator, or it's Christmas Day or it's my birthday, whatever. I'm hoping I bring a few dozen beers and can enjoy them definitely one every few days, or on certain milestones or something, maybe Friday happy hour or something like that. So it's just on a real genuine note, it's such a cool connection, and I'm so grateful to Shipyard. It's just been so easy and smooth and like very like I said, just natural and organic, of like, hey, this is cool, we're in, so how do we do it? And we're figuring that out. And like you said, we're building out the YouTube and building out the website and just figuring it out day by day. And it's been a really cool adventure.
Here's a toast to you, my friend.
I thought Fred was trying to give me a fist bump.
I'm on the West Coast and it's before 7 a.m. or else I'd join you.
Yeah, exactly.
Marissa, those are excuses. It's never too early.
Cheers, everybody. Cheers to Ronnie. Cheers to Shipyard Brewing. Cheers to Marissa, and cheers to the crew. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We'll keep going.
Cheers to Shipyard Brewing.
Yeah.